Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to today's discussion where we are going to be making 4 observations about 4 potential builds to watch for in the upcoming 3.12 Heist League. Yesterday we tried to keep a rather level-headed approach as we made 4 solid suggestions for proven starters for your consideration for the upcoming league. By the way, in case you haven't done it over the last week or two, make sure that you pre-patch and patch your Path of Exile game because there was a massive technical patch, so make sure that you patch that now so that way you're not waiting in queue for when Heist actually launches later on in the day. For those of you who are new to the channel, you can of course like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions just like this one. If at any point in time you'd like more information about any of the particular talking points that we mentioned today, there will be information down below in the video description for your viewing convenience, along with some timestamps to help you jump around my slightly balding forehead. So yesterday we offered 4 different solid starters for your league start, and today we actually don't want to do that. So get all of these solid, well-known, well-crafted, well-thought-out various predictions and suggestions, get those out of here, bring your hot takes, bring your memes, bring your crazy wild assumptions about whatever you think is going to happen in Heist, and let's do that right now. The first thing to keep your eye on is Crackling Lance. This skill looks amazing, with some sort of mad, insane scientist sort of combination of Archmage along with Arc, along with any kind of potential other lightning damage that could be thrown in there. This particular skill is going to take the meta by storm. I'm sure you were thinking it, I was thinking it, I'm sure we all were thinking. As soon as we saw this particular gem, there was one thought on the entire Path of Exile collective mind. Unlimited power! Memes aside for a moment, this thing looks absolutely sick. It's got on the bottom end of it 246 base damage and on the top end 737 lightning damage at gem level 20. This particular gem, in terms of its competitive spaces, is very, very promising. With nerfs to ball lightning and with Arc forever in favor and out of favor based on its remaining chains or its remaining damage or its potential reach, this particular new skill looks like it's going to be the flavor of the month skill just based on its preview alone. Lightning damage is incredibly easy nowadays to scale up, and there are a host of ascendancies that you can choose to use to either achieve elemental pen or elemental proliferation or just added base damage onto any sorts of different spell casts that you want to be dealing. Don't forget that Righteous Fire, specifically Vol Righteous Fire, is a thing, and so if you're just looking to build an amazing spell damage-based lightning crackling wizard, then this is going to be the gem for you. Flame Wall as a skill offers a ton of potential, and this is why this is a hot take! With damage numbers that make it potentially standalone viable as a DPS gem, this particular skill, Flame Wall, could be a meta-dominating skill where a whole bunch of players just decide, yeah, forget it, I'm just going to start putting up walls everywhere. You get a wall, you get a wall. You may look at the gem and think, yeah, well, Iron, it's not that great. I mean, the base initial damage is only 456 damage at gem level 20, and really, that's not that great in and of itself. But Flame Wall has got this secondary debuff that will apply to enemies that are inside it that deals 1800 base fire damage per second. Now, if that base number doesn't get you excited, the next couple of lines on the gem should. First off, the base duration of this thing is 4.9 seconds. Beyond that, the base secondary duration damage is 2 seconds, and then modifiers to spell damage apply to this skill's damage over time effect. You can scale up the dot damage with Flame Wall's secondary debuff by scaling up spell damage. That is ridiculously strong, as there are way more places on the tree, on ascendancies, and on gear where you can scale up spell damage than you can scale up fire damage. It's also a lot cheaper to do so because it's a lot easier to craft spell-based damage gear rather than fire dot gear. Oh, and in case I haven't sold you on this hot skill, this skill also acts as a wall that you can throw projectiles to, which will then apply that secondary debuff to anything they hit. So you could be playing any sort of build that uses projectiles, and now it all of a sudden becomes a mini fireball-esque style skill, adding on this secondary layer of a burning debuff without having to scale into damage over time multiplier as a primary means of damage. You can simply scale up all of your bonkers damage into spell damage, and then it gets added on as a debuff when your projectile goes through the wall and hits its intended target. Consider the numbers on Flame Wall for just a moment with Armageddon Brand and Fireball. Considering that the secondary damage from Flame Wall scales with spell damage modifiers, there is some real promise here to this particular skill, both for party play and for individual DPS numbers. The secondary debuff from Flame Wall alone is already better than 2 max hits from attached Armageddon brands over the course of 2 seconds, which is the base duration of the secondary debuff from Flame Wall. Flame Wall's secondary debuff deals more damage than Fireball's top end hit on a level 20 gem. Now, please don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that Flame Wall is better in the playstyle or offers just overall more damage than Armageddon Brand or Fireball. No one should be making that statement yet. None of us have gotten to actually play with Flame Wall yet, so we don't know how it actually feels in the game, whether or not it's got the speed and the smoothness of a brand playstyle, or if it's got the satisfying explosions and the wonderful smooth gameplay of a Fireball, whether that's using Ignite or a hit-based version of a build. We just don't know what the mechanics of Flame Wall are going to feel like as you play. So don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying Flame Wall is now the new OP flame skill. What I am saying is that the base numerical value off of this particular skill, Flame Wall's secondary debuff, is ridiculous, and it's comparable to other skills' base damage that are already build enabling and build worthy in their own right as standalone skills. When you couple this with the fact that you can add this debuff to any projectile, yeah, it's safe to say I'm hype. I'm excited for Flame Wall and all of the various builds that are going to take advantage of it. Sigil of Power is another exciting gem to get stoked about and to start building around. Offering an AoE arena where you are going to be able to scale up your damage while mitigating damage from any enemies that are inside that area, this is the sort of consecrated ground area of effect build and playstyle that we've all been longing for in Path of Exile. Do you want to be rewarded for having smart positioning? Do you want to be rewarded for potentially putting an enemy in a disadvantageous position? Do you want to be able to stack effect after effect after effect that is going to scale up your own damage and effectiveness and scale down your enemies? Sigil of Power rewards and incentivizes that specific type of gameplay to Path of Exile. With strong synergistic mechanics in the game, whether that's Fevered Mind, Archmage, and a ton of different support gems that have been released since 3.10 that have got massive skill multipliers, there are tons of ways in which you can activate the required 400 mana spent in order to charge up your Sigil of Power. Whether you want to use Sigil of Power for full-on, full-out offensive power-up abilities, or if you want to use it for defensive abilities and rush your way to its max stages, either way, Sigil of Power is going to allow players and afford players an advantage and an incentive for playing Path of Exile in a more tactical, positional-aware method. The damage offered by Sigil of Power is greater than the flat amount offered by Wrath for attacks, just by way of comparison. Now again, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that Sigil of Power is better than Wrath. What I'm saying is that it offers another layer of power. Sigil of Power's power isn't limited to attacks or spells in the way that Wrath is. While Wrath requires you to reserve 50% of your mana to take advantage of its powers for attacks or for spells, Sigil of Power simply requires you to be close enough to your allies in party play to provide a potentially additional 564 base lightning damage at max stages. Some of you are going to be really big brain, high IQ players, and you're going to figure out that instead of choosing between Wrath or between Sigil of Power, why not both, Morty? Sigil and Wrath of Power. By combining the flat added lightning damage of Sigil of Power and then the scaling more spell lightning damage from Wrath, your lightning damage levels are going to be higher than Shaggy during Woodstock. It's okay if you millennials don't know who Shaggy is or what Woodstock is. It's okay. For you Summoner players out there, I am stoked, and I hope you are as well, for the couple of new quality of life changes that have come with the upcoming 3.12 Heist League and with the new uniques that are going to be available as toys for all of us summoning boys and girls. The new Skeleton Players unique, the Iron Mass, is truly a unique befitting of the old style of Path of Exile unique design, where it is truly unique. It's not necessarily just simply better than something else in slot. It doesn't necessarily have a particular leveling use. It's got unique properties that will unlock unique playstyles for summoners to enjoy. There's a couple of things here to unpack. First off, Unholy Might. Unholy Might is a buff that grants 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. Now, just as a way of representing this as a figure, oftentimes what players used to do way back in the day of Path of Exile's history was a thing called stat sticking. Players used to use a weapon in their offhand that would not hit with their primary hand, and it wasn't primarily there as damage per se on its own, it was there as a stat stick to buff the main source of damage coming from your main hand. This was back in the dark days before all of the melee reworks have made melee really fun to play in two-handed and in sword and board fashion. But seriously, stat sticking was a thing. It was a problem, and GGG solved it in a lot of different ways. But what the Iron Mass is doing is allowing us to potentially stat stick moving forward, granting us Unholy Might, which is a whole bunch of extra damage. Not only will we as players and summoners get the advantage of now having Unholy Might, and for many of you, you might be wondering, well, why would I want to use that as a summoner? I want my summons to be doing the damage. Don't worry, your skeleton warriors now get this weapon equipped in their hands. That's why the art is displayed as such. This means a couple of things. It means that our skeletons will also have Unholy Might, because that's a status effect that they'll have from having this weapon equipped to them. And besides the Unholy Might that those skeletons then have, they'll then do triple damage with hits as long as we've hit recently. Recently in Path of Exile refers for the most part to the last 4 seconds. So there's a couple of ways that you could take this. You could play this with a projectile style of play, like let's say Spectral Throw, or you could play this with a Cyclone style of play where you're constantly spinning around. There's lots of different ways that you could play this particular build, whether you want to truly get into the middle and get into the mix and be dealing damage yourself, or if you just want to equip it so that way then your big skeleton guys can be using it. Either way is going to be a very fun and very interesting playstyle that is new to Path of Exile. In a video we made a couple of weeks ago saying that we think everything at this point is being designed with Path of Exile 2 in mind, I think this actually gives us a little bit of insight potentially into what's going on in POE 2. I mean, think about it. We've already got Animate Guardians, which can equip all sorts of different items, and it's a very unique skill slot. But now we've got a unique that allows us to essentially duplicate itself onto other summons. This is going to be very interesting, and it could mean that in Path of Exile 2, we can potentially deck ourselves out with a set of gear and then also duplicate that set of gear onto our summons. That's very, very cool and very, very exciting. Also coming in Heist is, of course, the buff that all of our permanent minions that we summon are now going to stick around. This means our golems, our Animate Guardian, our zombies, our specters, they're all finally going to stick around when we log out and when we log back in. This is going to be very, very nice for anybody who plays a summoner. If you have played a summoner, especially over the last couple of leagues, then you know how annoying and obnoxious it can be to log into Path of Exile, sit down, be ready to play, and then go, oh yeah, I gotta summon like 8 or 11 or 20 different things. Anyway, the list goes on and on. So it's quite nice that we've got all of these quality of life features that are now available to us as summoner players. And I gotta say this. Good job, GGG. Thank you. Thank you. From summoner players everywhere, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for making it easier and more convenient and more smooth to play summoners. Well, thanks so much for joining us once again for today's discussion. I'd love to read down below in the comments what thoughts you have about potential builds that are coming out in 3.12 Heist League that excite you. Is it anything that has to do with Crackling Lance, Sigil of Power, Flame Wall, or maybe summoner buffs? Or is it something else entirely that was mentioned in the patch notes that we haven't discussed here today? I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you're most hyped about and your hottest takes for the upcoming 3.12 Heist League. Thanks once again for joining us today. Big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters, and I hope this league, 3.12 Heist, is the league a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.